Uh, Please let me know when you see it.
Looks good.
Okay, perfect. Good. Um, okay, so for the start, this is one quote. It said, communication is the first thing we really learn in life. Funny thing is, once we grow up, learn our words, and really start talking, the harder it becomes to know what to say or how to ask for what we really need. And that leads us to the topic of assertive communication today. So, how often have you heard people say, I wish I were more assertive? How often have you told that to yourself? Hmm? I can't see all the, sorry, I have to put my screen so I can see everyone. If you want to comment or to ask any questions, just please raise
Okay.
your hand so I can see it. Otherwise, I won't be able to see it. Okay. So um, for many of us, basically, it's the feeling that circumstances or other people have influenced us to something we don't really want to do. So how we respond to events and to people around us comes from the complex mix of factors. They include personality, our personal values and beliefs, our level of self-confidence, and our self-trust and self-belief. Also, it comes from our sense of self-worth. It comes from our relationship with others. It comes from our knowledge, our skills, our experience that we have gained through life. Um, During our lifetime, we all had situations and experiences where we either felt powerless in the situation or we find that things are happening around us for us. Or we wanted to change the situation, but we were not sure how exactly to do it. Or we were being influenced to do one thing and we wanted to do something completely different. So I believe each one of us had been in that kind of situation. It's hard to think of all the aspects of our lives that do not involve people in this or that way. So learning about communication, communication styles of other people, and our own personal communication style is something that is a never-ending learning path for all of us. So today we are going to talk about specifically how to become more assertive. I will share with you some hints and tips around it, and hopefully this will spark self-reflection in all of you to start thinking about how to be more assertive in your everyday life. Okay, just I would like to hear, has any one of you ever struggled with being assertive? Really struggled?
Yes, I just opened the floor for our students so that they can unmute themselves
Sure,
or they can raise their hand.
sure.
But yeah, definitely, I think, especially when you're speaking to someone who you perceive as having authority over you, I think a lot of times we tend to shy away. And
Mhm.
perhaps that's the most important time to express yourself. That's the best time where you can, when your communication's actually going to get some type of a result.
Yeah,
So a lot of times you talk to your coworker, you share all the bad things that are happening, and
yeah,
then when you get called into a big meeting, everybody's quiet. So that doesn't
true.
help. That doesn't help the institution, obviously.
True, true. So feel free, just like the previous time who was in our previous session, to speak your mind, to ask questions. It will become much more efficient and much more effective for you and productive for all of us to do it that way.
So any of our students today, have you all ever been in a situation where you kind of wanted to say something, but you were lacking the assertiveness to kind of speak up? You want to share maybe your experience and maybe how it could have turned out differently?
A quick one from myself. I work in IT, and there's so many changes that are happening.
Mm-hmm.
So now, I don't know, like now sometimes problem solving becomes a challenge when like now something has changed, like you find there's been an update or a new product is being introduced
Mm-hmm.
that possibly now we were not informed about and we are called in, there's a problem now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very difficult to say you know, I was not part of now the process of training. When you guys receive this product, now you have a problem, now you call me. So yeah, it becomes a bit of an awkward situation, because we are called in when it's broken or it doesn't work, and we have to figure it out on the go, you know. So yeah, for me, I find sometimes, when you don't know about something or there's a knowledge gap, you then battle to be assertive, or you have an issue, confidence issue with then the product.
Yeah. Yes. I thank you for sharing this. I think it's specifically hard when it's in IT industry with so many changes in the area. The misconception that we have around assertive communication, the most frequent one, is that some people think that asserting yourself means being bossy, controlling, or pushy. That's the very common misconception about assertiveness. It doesn't. Asserting yourself practically means standing up for what you feel and believe. It means seeing that your needs are met. And your needs won't be met. It's not able to meet your needs unless you express those in assertive way. So in doing this, you are recognizing, first of all, the rights. Later on, we will talk about assertive rights that each one of us have. So it means actually recognizing your rights that you have as an individual. So I just shared with you here some skills, top 10 skills of 2025. As you can see, it's a very high ranking leadership and social influence. It has a lot to do with assertive communication. And that's why I wanted to just list the top 10 skills that will be very important in the coming years. And practically, you can see that communication is more or less part of each of these skills. So let me just go to my next slide. It's the truth. How we interact with other people and how others interact with us is greatly affects how we're going to feel about it. So this means that basically it's important to recognize our rights when dealing with others. But if you have rights, the other people have those rights too, and you can't neglect those. So being assertive also means recognizing the rights of others. I need to slide. Okay, so let's talk about the definition of assertive communication. So assertive communication is a way of communicating beliefs, feelings, thoughts in an open, honest manner without violating the rights of others. That's the essential definition of assertive communication. And assertive communication is what we should all aim for, and it's the best of both worlds. You meet your needs and the needs of the other person, so everyone is happy. So this is kind of where when our needs and others' needs are met, it's the assertive communication. So before we go further, I would like to talk to you about 4 communication styles. There are 4 essential communication styles. We have passive communication style, we have passive aggressive, we have aggressive and assertive. Now, don't get me wrong, we from time to time communicate in each 4 of these styles. It is just that we have one dominant communication style, the one we naturally incline to, because either it comes from our upbringing, from, like I said, our values, our beliefs, our self-esteem, our self-awareness as well. But we do communicate through all of these 4 different communication styles, but we tend to use the one the most. So see now this chart with what it means communicating passively. So it is like other needs are the priority. It is respectful, it is appropriate, but it is not honest and it's not direct. Passive aggressive, they call this communication style the relationship killer. Yeah, and it truly is. What it means, it's not respectful, it's not appropriate, it's not honest, it's not direct. So neither person's needs are met. And let me tell you, give a broader scope of this topic about passive aggressive behavior. Um, Communication styles are very much tied to, let's say, different geographies. Now, I'm coming from Eastern Europe. And people generally in Eastern Europe tend to use passive aggressive communication. Whereas people, for example, from the Scandinavian countries, let's say Sweden, Norway, Finland, Denmark, they tend to speak assertively. So it also depends on the geographies because, like I said previously, it generates our communication styles is very much tied to our upbringing. So let me get back to this topic, passive aggressive. So speaking passively, passive aggressive communication style, basically it means I will, for example, I will say I will do something, but I won't do it, and I have no intention of doing it. So I will agree on something with you, but I'm not planning to do it. That's basically the core of passive aggressive communication. And it's not without reason that it's called the relationship killer, because like I said, neither person's needs are met in this way of communication. Aggressive and assertive communication, people usually don't see the difference. So when I was telling me, like an Eastern European girl, when I would speak to somebody from the Scandinavia, I would perceive their communication style as aggressive. Coming from the passive aggressive geography, that kind of communication, from my perspective, a long time ago, not now, of course, would be perceived as aggressive. Sometimes people mix these two communication styles, especially people who are more passive in their communication. But here is the difference. Aggressive communication is not respectful, it's not appropriate. So there is a lot of language that is used that is not respectful or appropriate. It is honest, it is direct, but it's not respectful. And that is the main difference between being aggressive and being assertive. You will be honest, you will be direct, but you will be respectful and you will use appropriate language. That's the main difference between aggressive and assertive communication styles. Do you have any questions about this? Or would you like to maybe talk about your preferable communication style and why do you think you have been using this communication style in your communication?
Can I ask an interesting question? A passive aggressive person, when they are proposed for marriage, how they respond?
Sorry, can you repeat it?
A passive aggressive person,
Yeah.
when they are proposed for marriage.
Okay. Yeah, what about it?
How they go about it? Would they say yes and then the yes is a no?
Yes. Probably, I'm not quite sure how they would respond, but I think it would be, it has to do something with being, having avoidant attachment style. So this is completely another topic that you now opened here with this question, because there is a communication style, but there is also something called attachment style. So people who tend to speak in passive aggressive communication style also have attachment issues. But this is very broad topic.
Okay.
So just put it this way, somebody who won't say yes or no when it comes to any kind of personal relationships, it's a high chance that this person has attachment issues as well. And I won't say anything else.
Okay.
We have a comment from Isatu. Isatu, thank you for your comment. She says, before now, I used to be shy in communicating issues that has to do with problem solving. But because of the level of responsibilities and movements, I am now bold enough to say things outrightly to my supervisors, and it has helped me in the institution.
Of course, I think through our experience and through our life generally, we understand that talking in any of these communication styles except assertive won't get us far, or it will just complicate our relations that we have. I don't say that communicating assertively will not probably make some people unhappy. It probably will. But it's not our journey in this life to necessarily make all the people happy around us. Because if you have this kind of strong innate belief that you're here to make all the people happy, you're probably very passive in your communication style. That's the learning lesson for all of us to understand and to learn. So, would you like to comment on this? How do you behave most? Anybody would like to comment on this? And how would you like to behave most? And why?
Let's see. Mojisola Esther, she has a comment. She says, I believe that a better communication style can be learned, especially for those who are international, about their growth and relationship.
True. It can be learned. It's definitely. It is the thing of practice and repeat. Just like any other skill, communication is a skill. So, of course, some of us have this talent for communication. So it's just there is some fine tuning to be done for us to communicate it more assertively, but it's definitely a skill that can be learned and can be taught.
So regarding your question, let's see, do any of our students here today want to take a guess at what is the most common form of communication? Which of these four are the most commonly used? There's no right or wrong. You can just say what you think. Yeah, you can say what you think it is, and I'm sure Lana will let us know. I vote that it's passive. I think that's the most common type of communication.
Okay.
Let's see, Sunil. Sunil, do you want to take a stab at the question?
Yeah, I think it's passive aggressive because you have a lot of people being passive, but you also have a lot of people exercising aggressive behavior too, more in construction industry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting perspective.
Yes.
Oh, we have a lot of participation now. Echeria. Thank you, Echeria. Go ahead.
Yeah, hello. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak. Well, from where I come from, I believe the most common way of communication is aggressive.
Okay.
Yes, the way I come from, because it's now that I realize that we don't normally get everything through aggressive. Our parents, before they talk to us, they shout, they talk to us in a very hard way, and we learn it too. So we learn the same way. We have children, we talk to our children, we tell them something in a very high voice, trying so that is where I come from. But now I have learned that that's not the best way. We need to use get things from people or make people to do things. We use assertive, and assertive brings people to listen to you. But we don't understand the impact of our communication on people. Because when you shout, use aggressive to speak to someone, the person put a block. And we find it that we begin to have conflict even within our family, our children, not realizing that the aggressive way of communication is not the best. But that's where my culture, where I come from, I'm a Nigerian, almost all parents use aggressiveness to speak to their children. And we copy the same thing to be aggressive too. Thank you.
Thank you, Taria. That's very true. That's what I said. A lot of our communication styles comes from our upbringing and the way our parents communicated to us or members of our family. So yeah. Okay, anyone else? Okay, I see a lot.
I was just gonna say that Echeria, the most valuable thing that you have at this point is that you're conscious of it. Once
Yes.
you're conscious of it,
Yep.
now you can start the change, and
Yes.
your children will learn from you, and they will pass on the correct way to communicate. Just one comment from Jeremias Miguel. He says, when you communicate assertively, you share your opinions without judging others for theirs. Communication involves clear, honest statements about your beliefs, needs, and emotions.
That's so true. That is so true that, one of our assertive rights is mentioned here. I will talk more about it later. You would not believe how many
Hello.
people. Oh, sorry. Yes.
Can I also contribute, please?
Sure, of course, please.
Hello.
We can hear
Can
you.
I make a contribution?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yes,
Olayin.
hear you.
Yes, my name is Olayinka. I'm from Nigeria. I actually followed the last speaker that said aggressiveness is one of the major ways of communication to children in Nigeria. In addition, it's correct. In addition to that, we also use sign languages. For example, if there's a visitor that came to visit the family in the house, and the parents of the children doesn't want the children to collect things from the visitor or stay where the adults are, talking or discussing. The parents can use eyeballs, just sign language like eyeballs to show the children or to tell them to enter without saying anything. But children also tend to learn that in that same environment, and they also get the message without any words being spoken out by the parents. So, and if a parent doesn't want the child to collect anything, the parent can roll his or her eyeball, and the children will get that it's a no. So that's another way or means of communication in Nigeria. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing this. I will speak about it later, about verbal and non-verbal communication. Thanks for bringing this up. Okay.
Hello.
Hello, Victor.
Yes, good morning. It's a very interesting topic, and I would tend to say, as you said, the last one is supposed to be the best, and I think it is the best. But we have to look at history and why is it is as it is. Just listening to the people from Nigeria and Africa, I'm from Grenada, which actually is, as you know, if you know the history, we are descendants of Africa. And all this way of came about through slavery. We had to obey rules, assertiveness. When they said, don't do this, don't do that, we have to do it. And as the gentleman explained to, and the lady, we now have carried that because that is only what we learned. We didn't have experience. I had seen it differently because I've been given the opportunity. I studied in England. And so therefore I saw a different form of communication and which is what in my thinking should be. The problem is that these things is still embedded in our culture, even in high levels. So I'm coming and starting from England and coming and try to use the kind of this so we can get more production and understand each other in a more disciplined and non-fighting way. You'll find they'll just trash you off with their assertiveness. So it's an interesting topic. I'm glad to be on, and I think we'll learn. But it is also, as I said, you have to know our background and why it is as it is. And I like to thank AIU for the approach in education again, and because having that form of education and in this kind of communication and exposure to information would help, I think, and I myself would try to push much more people to come to join AIU so we could get that. And I want to say thank you very much for your
I'm so glad that you mentioned it because I will want to add something to it. Yes, of course, we all know what kind of behavior and everything that slavery brought to this world. Very unfortunate, but there is something I want to emphasize. As an HR person, I'm working with people from all over the world. And I'm sure that you heard about different generations. So you know about the boomer generation, you know about the Gen X, you know about millennials, you know about this last generation called the Generation Z. And there is a new generation coming up, the generation of my son, who is 11 years old. It's called Alpha Generation. And I can say with great accuracy that this kind of communication style in Generation Z, which is the digital generation, most of the people in Generation Z, regardless of their background, regardless of where they come from, regardless of, of the history, they tend to communicate in assertive way. And I see it as a great victory for this mankind that we now have the whole new generation, Generation Z, that comes from all geographies, and they learn to communicate and to assert their rights, regardless of the history. That is a really a ray of hope that I can see, and I can speak about this because, like I said, I'm in the HR. I work with so many people from different generations, especially from Generation Z. And I think this kind of internet thing and the digital world bringing us all together, learning about each other, learning that you should and must communicate assertively, it's the one thing that actually taught this generation that, claiming your rights, assertively speaking, stating what your needs are, is really kind of the tunnel at the end that I can see of the way of the communication styles of the previous generations, especially, for example, some older generations. And I come from that generation. I'm Generation X. So don't get me wrong. I'm not speaking against Boomer or Gen X generation. I'm just saying that the new generations that come, they assert their rights, regardless of the background, regardless of the race, regardless of the gender, regardless of the nationality or the history. And that really brings hope.
Fantastic. Yes, for sure. We're close to the halfway point. Lana, how are we doing? Are we about halfway?
Okay.
Do we need to speed up? Do we need
Yes.
to slow down? Should we take
No,
more questions?
We're fine. We're
We're
fine.
good?
I think you're fine. If you have questions, I'm more than happy to answer them.
Let me get Burbota. Burbota, did you have your hand up for a while? Burbota.
You have to unmute if you forgot to do that.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. My name is Bonita Burnett, and I am very intrigued with what the speaker is saying. However, I was listening to some of the other students stating that they were raised with screaming and yelling. And I'm from a British colony, only British colony in South America. However, I was raised with screaming and yelling, and I do not scream and yell. I am more passive, and I raised my daughter more passive, of course, of my style of communicating. But what I find when I moved to the US is that people are so rude and so aggressive that I had to reorganize my communication style. And there are times, if I don't get aggressive, I will be trampled on. So I am trying to figure out the balance in the middle on if a supervisor scream and yell at you, and you're not supposed to scream back and yell at them. And if you call them aside and say, we need a talk, we got a space, and we talk, and I says, I don't like you screaming at me. It's making me feel uncomfortable. And next thing, that supervisor will write you up and say you're aggressive, you're this, you're that, you scream, you yell when it's not true. How do you deal with something like that?
Well, I mean, it's always very tough to speak about all forms of manipulation and obvious gaslighting. It's not easy to deal with that. It's not easy to deal with people who are manipulative. I always remind myself that being manipulative is just one way of our coping mechanisms that we adapted ourselves or maladapted ourselves to our surroundings. It's not easy, but it's about what you want to achieve. What do you want to achieve means that you have choices. So you don't have to put up with that kind of behavior. You can always turn and leave and say something very assertive, like, I see that you're not, or you can say any sorts of sentences that are assertive, like, I would like to close this conversation right now because this is becoming offensive, or your communication is very disrespectful. You can say it very calm tone and just close the conversation. But I really would like to emphasize one thing. Dealing with manipulative people is very exhausting, and sometimes it does not
Yes.
turn out to have a happy ending.
Right.
So my warmest advice would be to do your best to change that environment and not to be in the environment. Because
Okay,
in the
thank you.
long run, in the long term, it's very exhausting.
Yes.
It does not, you know, turn out to be assertive at the end with this kind of people, particularly.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. So yes, this is a good point that Roberta got. Passive communication, aggressive communication, and passive-aggressive communication are our coping mechanisms. That's what we learned through life. It's very important to understand that if we communicate, for example, passive or aggressive, we have some secondary gain behind that. We have some secondary gain. Behind any of our behavior, there is what we are getting out of it. It's very important to recognize and to self-reflect. What do we get with aggressive communication? What do we get with passive communication? Most frequently, with aggressive communication, when we try to aggressively assert our needs, there is very much rage behind that. And the rage is sometimes the covering emotion for sadness. So most of the people who communicate aggressively are deep down very sad. They just are not taught how to communicate their sadness, so they turn it to rage. Maybe being sad was not allowed in their families, so they are turning it into rage. Most frequently, behind passive communication, there is a person who is a people pleaser. And it feels in the comfort zone being a people pleaser. So it's my comfort zone. I feel comfortable around it being a people pleaser. So this is kind of, I'm a little bit going deep dive into some psychological things. I don't want to go there. It's just think about it. What is behind, if you communicate passive aggressive or aggressive, what is behind? What is your secondary psychological gain that you get out of it? This will help you to go out of this communication style and become more assertive.
Yes, and I think if Lana, if we are able to decipher what's behind my coworkers, my supervisor's way of communicating, and we're able to connect with the person, then obviously we might have a breakthrough and have a better relationship because we understand each other.
I think it's always good to understand that 90% of cases when we have some kind of bad communication or relations with other person, it's not about us at all. It's about some other problems that this person has, and it's just they are being projected onto us. Of course, it does not, you know, somehow it's not the excuse for that kind of behavior. It's just for us to understand where is it coming from. Okay, what are the 3 C's of assertive communication? This is very important. So confidence, you do believe in your ability to handle the situation. Clear, the message you have is clear and easy to understand. And controlled. I think this is one, the hardest one, honestly. You deliver information in a calm, sorry, I have to move this, and controlled manner. So there is one lesson I want you to teach. I want you to learn. Trying to communicate assertively goes step by step. If you tend, for example, to communicate aggressively, and you see you won't be able to convey your message or assert your needs in a calm and controlled manner, it's always good to postpone that communication or that hard talk that you have with another side to, you know, next morning, next day, 7 days, until you manage to regulate your emotions. It's not easy to regulate your emotions, so this is a good way how you can learn to regulate your emotions by postponing some talks that you have in which you want to assert your needs until you're able to deliver the information in a calm and controlled manner. I think that is one step back in learning how to communicate assertively.
Yeah, you didn't go to school.
Yeah, I go.
You went.
Here's something, I'm not sure if these are for us or it's just, okay. Just a second, I have to check this. Okay, so I was talking about the assertive needs or assertive, sorry, not needs, assertive rights that each one of us have. So these are the 5 rights that are like the most important ones and universal for all the people. So the first assertive right is you have the right to express yourself, your opinions, needs, and feelings as long as you do not hurt others. You have the right to express yourself even if it hurts someone else, as long as your intentions are not violent. You have the right to make your requests known to others as long as you feel they have the right to decline. This is very important. There are situations where the rights of individuals are not clear. However, you always have the right to discuss the situation with another person. And you have the right to exercise your rights. It's very important to understand that we have all these rights, but all these rights are given to other people as well. There is one right that's not specifically mentioned here, but I would like to bring your attention to it. One of the assertive rights altogether, there are 10 assertive rights, is you have a right to change your mind. A lot of our feelings of disconnect or miscommunication or our inner feeling that we are not heard, valued, or seen comes from neglecting this right, that you have a right to change your mind. A lot of times we agree to something that we regret afterwards. It is just our way to cope with it. So I will agree, I will help you today. Either way, either I have, you know, a lot of workload on my back. But you have a right to change your mind and to say, listen, something happened, or I received some new information. So after all, I won't be able to help you. Keep in mind that any other person has the same right. So this is one of the very commonly neglected assertive rights, that you have a right to change your mind. So what, if any, assertive right you neglect or don't give yourself? Have you ever thought about that?
I mean, I hope we have some students who want to participate in these. The thing that I see is, for example, you have the right to make your request known to others as long as they can decline. I mean, that seems like in a normal relationship, but when you're like in a supervisor relationship or a manager employee relationship, I mean, individually, I might not like doing a certain activity, but it's an activity that somebody has to do. And if if I'm at this, I mean, if I'm at this company and there's no real reason why I shouldn't, have this responsibility added, especially if you say, well, look, if you're full, let's remove this responsibility so you can do this. I mean, at some point in that scenario, I don't know if that is a valid, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's the only one I would wonder in the relationship of company employees and how you would resolve that, because there's always something that someone prefers not to do.
Of course. The thing is, hopefully you work in an environment where some of your rights and obligations are legally regulated, right? So there is a legal regulation behind your job description. There is a legal regulation behind your work hours. There is a legal regulation behind how much overtime is paid, or if you work night shifts, how many night shifts you can do in a row. Hopefully, you work in an environment which obeys the law. Let's put it like that. And you're informed prior joining this environment whether you're okay with these specific requirements that the company will request from you to, work overtime from time to time. That's very important to understand the circumstances and what are the conditions and terms you're joining one company. If you perceive that your rights and the demands that are coming from your manager or supervisor are not regulated, like somebody is asking you to work overtime, but you're not paid as you should be for that, then you have every, not just assertive, but legal right to require it. The thing is, will you stand up for yourself or not? Right?
Right.
It comes, when it comes to this kind of legal labor things, it's also very important to understand that you need to be informed about your rights. I came across so many times in my career about the people who didn't know about their basic employee rights because they either didn't read the employment contract, or they read it and signed it, but they didn't actually understood their rights coming from it. So in order to be able to communicate assertively, you need to understand what your rights are. I'm speaking about in this working environment. That comes from that, because lots of your rights are regulated by the labor law. So you should at least know about them and refer back to them when your supervisor or manager does something that is not legal to do. Unfortunately, there is a lot of mobbing, there is a lot of gaslighting, there is a lot of other things that the manager can do. My recommendation would be to leave this environment as soon as possible. You can't fight it. It's very hard. It's very hard. It's not impossible, but it is very hard.
Thank you. And Burbota and you, Cheria, did you guys want to contribute something or ask a question?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I wanted to contribute that, well, this is my experience. For example, I've been on the job for 2 years, and then a new supervisor came on, and that supervisor have no idea about my job, but he is supervising me and cutting me down every day that I don't know what I'm doing, but yet he doesn't know what he's doing. And he's making me do everything in addition to saying I don't, and write papers like a little trail to say I am aggressive, I don't know what I'm doing. He talked to me about improvement, and in the meantime, he is asking me how to pretty much do his job. So now it's like no win. And of course, you're looking for another job because of this experience. But then you become afraid because you say, I wonder if the next supervisor is going to be like him. So you're in one of those cases of catch-22. So how would you handle that?
I would assume, I don't know for sure, but I would assume that your supervisor feels that this situation is very insecure. He's not very confident about himself. Let's talk openly. A lot of people who, you know, get to new roles feel very insecure. Even if they have experience, they would feel some level insecure because, you know, they don't know the environment, they don't know the people. How long has this supervisor been in his role?
I would say a couple of months.
Ooh, well, okay, it's been some time. So the thing is, maybe you should have one-on-one talk with this person.
I tried doing that 100 times, and all he do is scream and yell, and we get nothing accomplished.
Okay.
But just write paperwork that I am this, I am bad, I'm this, everything about, oh, I need improvement. But yet he giving me work to do in addition to my projects that I'm normally doing, and say he needed today before the day's out, and you get it done, and he never looked at it until like the next 4 weeks later.
Then my advice is to keep everything in written. So you keep everything in written, and you ask this person to send any kind of additional requests or workload to you in written. I'm not quite sure what kind of relationship you have with the supervisor of your supervisor. It would be good to understand does that person is aware of the communication style and this obvious misbehavior of this person, but you might consider going to their direct report and speaking about this behavior.
Well, I did spoke to my old supervisor that left, and he pretty much reprimanded him, and now he's chastising me for that.
It's hard to say. It's hard to say.
Oh boy.
Yeah, I think the only way would be to reach out to someone who's above the supervisor in your organization that hasn't left yet. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Thank you for the contribution. And Acacio, I haven't heard from you today, and I see your hand up. And then Chigozi, because we haven't heard from you either so far, so it would be great. Go ahead, Acacio.
Can you hear us?
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Hello? Hello?
Yes, go ahead, Acacio.
Hello?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to contribute only.
Sure.
Hello?
We can hear you.
Hello? My question is, you don't hear me?
We can hear
My
you.
question is, okay, we realize that the person has different attitudes. The attitude is related to behavior. The first attitude is the passive. And the second, it could be the aggressive, and the last one, defensive. That means in assertive communication, we can if somebody can use some of them to resolve some situation in labor sector. That means in psychological context, that person may have not that attitude, because it depends on the daily activity the person could do at any time. Because some people, some worker who change their attitude because the stress related to
True.
the job.
True.
Okay,
That is
It's-
so true.
that's
is
your
so
all.
true. That is so true. Under stress or under some very stressful communication, some people tend to change their communicative style. So they can, they can be generally assertive people, but under a stressful situation, we can see some behavioral traits change, and those people can become either aggressive or passive. That is again the coping mechanism. That is how we learned to operate under stress. Like I said previously, we all tend to communicate from time to time aggressively, passively, and it's all okay. I'm not saying that under all circumstances you will tend to communicate assertively. Let me just give you one example. Like, you're, in the street and somebody is trying to, I don't know, rob you. You will not be assertive saying like, oh, I really would like you to understand that, putting your hand in my pocket is not a very good. No, of course not. It depends on the circumstances that you're in. So sometimes it's very recommended to be aggressive. I'm just now generally trying to make you aware that speaking assertively has the biggest advantage and benefit for you in order to, execute your rights.
Thank
But we
you.
all tend to communicate in different communication styles from time to time, and that is all okay. Just tend to stay most of your communication time in a certain zone. That's the point.
Herbert, do you want to go ahead? And Lana, do we have a couple more slides? How are you with time? Should we take more questions or?
Yes, let's take, we have 4 more slides, which I would like to go through, but we can,
Okay.
we can
Okay, so
Herbert,
Herbert, if you can make it quick, and then we'll go on to the next slides to try to get them in.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm Herbert from Uganda, Kampala. I appreciate the presenter. Thank you so much. Now, mine is a contribution regarding communication between the employer and the employee. Are you getting me?
Yes.
Yes. So I have an experience between the two, being an employee and being an employer. I think basically to move on well with my little experience, it's better for the two, the employer and the employee, to understand each other. First of all, the employee to know that though even if you are more experienced from the job, even if you are more educated by your employer, is to understand that he's your superior, is on your top. So to know and understand that you must respect that employer, a manager or a director or anybody. And also secondly, to respect one another, and also the employee to be ready to learn from whatever he or she is doing on that job. So that makes you to, to move on well, and also to understand each other, and also to find that you enjoy your job. Thank you.
Thank you for your contribution. I would like just to get to these very 2 important slides before we move on with questions. Is that okay?
Yes, please.
Okay, sure. I mentioned before, and somebody raised this topic about verbal and nonverbal communication. I think it's very, very important to pay attention. When you try to communicate your rights, pay attention to your nonverbal clues. Sorry?
Go ahead. No, sorry, there was a speaker on. I was able to mute it.
No worries. So nonverbal clues are body language, eye contact, posture, listening cues, reactions that you put on. These are very important. Try to keep eye contact to stay focused. Lean on to get closer to your to the person you communicate with. These are very, very, very important things that convey your message. So in order to communicate assertively, pay attention to this. This is Albert Mehrabian's 738-55 rule, very important one. These are the elements of personal communication. So what we say is just 7% of our communication. Our voice and our tone of our voice is 38% of our communication, but our body language gets with 55% of our communication. So pay attention to your body language, to your nonverbal cues when you want to assertively communicate, because what you say is not that important as how you say it and what is your posture, what is your tone of voice, what is the eye contact, and everything else. There is a very, very good book. It's not a book, it's a script on body language. I can share it with Ricardo, and he can share it with you along with this presentation.
Fantastic.
Yes. So what I mentioned at the beginning, this is the main technique. I want you to remember this. If anything, I want you to remember this technique because I know it's very, very useful and it helps you to assert your rights. So whenever you want to assert your rights to someone, try to use the I message. There is I messages and you messages. When you start your communication with you message, you immediately get the other person in a defensive position. That person will immediately start to think how to defend themselves. So they will try to figure out of the communication or the narrative and the language. So what exactly it means? Take a look at this. This is the I message. Instead of saying, for example, you are always disrespectful because you know you're doing this or that. Try to start your message with I and express emotion. I feel disrespected when you do this or that in this or that situation. And I would like you to do this. So the I messages are number one assertive communication technique that can help you that the other person won't just shut down, become defensive, think of trillion reasons against what you want to assert to them. If you make this very small change how you start your line. So instead of starting with you, start with I and how you feel about something. You need to practice this. So just try each and every day consciously to change how you start your lines when you see that your rights are being neglected or that you are being disrespected in personal or work environment. Just make this slight change. Instead of you, start with I, show the emotion, tie the specific behavior of that is the one that person is doing in specific situation and say what you would like instead. This is
Excellent.
a very small change, but very powerful one. This is one step towards you being a good assertive communicator.
Yeah, I think this gets to the whole root of the issue that we've been talking about today, okay? We know how we need to communicate, and that's exactly examples of how we can go about it and achieve our needs, have better communication, and have better results, more satisfaction, more happiness overall. So we're at work such a large part of the day that by doing assertive communication, by following these guidelines can help us be more productive and happy during all those times. Fantastic.
You wrapped it up perfectly. So thank you for this, Ricardo. So that is what I wanted to share with you today. So we still, if you want, we can answer some questions that you have.
Sure. Let me take a look. Let's see. We've had, let me see. Chigoizi, Edem, I don't think you've participated today. Let me start with those who haven't had a chance to speak. Hi,
Hello,
Chigozi.
everyone.
Hi.
Yeah, hi. Good evening, everyone.
Hi, good evening.
Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, so it's a pleasure to be here and thank you for this wonderful presentation. I'm from Nigeria, so my contribution will be towards the cultural aspect of communication. We've listened to all types of communication, including assertive communication. And I would like to contribute by saying that communication, assertiveness, and reactions that we get from communication are not stagnant, they are dynamic. Because the way we perceive communication is affected by our culture. We all have various cultural backgrounds, various cultural beliefs, and no two cultures are actually the same. Some speakers mentioned that they were brought up under the culture of where parents had to shout and scream, and they grew up in that kind of culture. Some have also said that even though they grew up in culture where people shout and scream, they had to deviate from that culture and became more positive in their communication style. But I would like to say that the way we perceive communication is subjective because culture is subjective. So if we are reacting to a sort of communication, we have to take into cognizance the fact that what applies to me does not apply to another person. For instance, in some cultures, let's say the Muslim community, the girl child or the female gender is not actually that expressive and that assertive when it comes to communication. So when you're communicating with them and you're expecting to get certain kind of reactions and you don't get, you may be thinking that maybe communication is not taking place, but they are culturally bound not to be overtly responsive to your communication. So bottom line, when we are communicating with people, we need to take into cognizance the fact that our cultural biases may affect the way we receive communication. It will also affect whether we are assertive, whether we are aggressive or not. So some people can be silently aggressive because their culture doesn't allow them to be overtly aggressive. So that's just my small contribution towards this presentation. Thank you.
Very good one. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. And let's try with Kwimi Sefedin. Kwimi.
You just have to unmute.
Hello.
Yes,
you can get me.
Yes, we got you now. Perfect.
Yeah, okay. All right. Thank you. I really like the presentation. It is very excellent, and thank the presenter. I just have a question whereby there are situations where each and everybody in the organization has been given clear job descriptions, but then when it comes to implementation, you find we have a situation whereby it is not followed and people are just appointed to do the kind of work. You try to communicate that this one is not the right way and it is not moving. How do we get about this whereby the job descriptions are there, but they are not followed and people are just appointed by the person in charge to do different roles? How can we handle this kind of situation? Thank you.
The easiest way, the one that I would recommend, is to go to the either HR or the legal department and to try to speak to them if your manager is keeping you unheard or listened to that issue. You can either go to the HR or the legal department to talk about the job description and what you actually signed for and what is actually happening in the real life, to try to untangle the situation with unrealistic job descriptions that you have.
And Kwimi, I have a question for you. In these job descriptions that keep changing, are they completely different? Like, in other words, my question is, you know, sometimes with new technology, like for example, let's say WhatsApp, all of a sudden everybody uses WhatsApp. So at some point, let's say that you're, I mean, I'm just giving an example. Let's say you're in customer service. I mean, if you're in customer service at this point, you have to have WhatsApp with the customers potentially because all the customers are communicating with WhatsApp. So it's kind of like an evolution that happens in a position that organizations and people need to adapt to. So at what point do you distinguish between appropriate adaptation to change that has to happen versus, okay, you know, one day you're doing customer service, another day you're doing something completely different and, you know, jumping around. So I don't know if in your particular case, something specific, or?
I think, yes, I understand it is something different. For example, you are not in a finance department. For example, you are, and then you find that somebody is assigned the role of finance, and that person is not in position to do it. You are just appointing the person who is not totally in finance to do the work for finance. Another one is in a logistics department. You appoint totally different people to do this, and then the other people who are supposed to do this are again moved to do another kind of job, which brings some confusion. But I understand the technology part of it. It's not that related to that. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Excellent. Let me see anybody who hasn't participated. I see Nom Pumelelo, and that'll be the last question, I think, for the day. Nom Pumelelo. Nom Pumelelo, can you unmute? Okay, I think you've unmuted. We can hear you now.
Yes.
Hi,
Hello.
how are you? Good to see you.
Evening.
Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. Okay, I will take you a bit back on the non-verbal communication. Okay, since gestures, they have different meanings in different cultures. So how do you deal with that? For an example, issue of tone. According to my culture, we are soft speaking people, and others, you know, they are loud, you know, that's their culture. And also issue of eye contact. You know, according to my culture, you know, when you look a person on his or her eyes, you are showing disrespect. So how do you deal, you know, with this thing?
That's so good that you asked and you raised this topic. Of course, nonverbal cues differ from culture to culture. I here just showed examples of some that are generally perceived as right or wrong. Of course, it can differ and be completely different in other cultures. So the script that I'm about to share you also shares some clues about how different body language is, the same body language is perceived differently in different cultures.
Yeah.
In different cultures.
Yeah.
So thank you for bringing this up. This is very true. And I didn't want to offend anyone with these specific clues that I brought with about the body language. I just share something that is generally perceived as a good way to do as a part of the body language. But it's very important to make it aware. So I work in a very distributed team with different cultures, and we have these trainings around different cultures and their communication styles and their verbal and nonverbal communication, just to understand that something which is perceived positive in my culture won't necessarily be perceived positive in other culture. Very good point. Spot on.
Amazing. Well, I'd like to thank Lana Stamenkovic for joining us today for the second time. We would love to have you in the future if your schedule and your other commitments allow. You've helped, I think, open up our thinking on communication, assertiveness, and human resources. And all of our students today, thank you so much. Thank you for being here today. And I hope we can take this outside of the class and start practicing some of the skills that Lana has brought to us today. So thank you, everyone. Great to see you.
Thank you, Lana. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Prochainement, s'il y a des locaux de présentation comme ça, faites-le en français aussi.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
We thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Bye bye.
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 Bye. Bye.
Bye bye.
Au revoir. Bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye from Kenya. Bye. Bye-bye. Thank you.